Welcome to the Washdown podcast, episode number 93. And tonight, James and I sat down with a police officer, Kelsey Helfrich. She is also an Air Force veteran. So we had a great conversation with her talking about the differences between her old department and new department and the things that she has seen and experienced across her career in law enforcement. So we had a great time shooting the episode. Hope you guys enjoy it. Remember to like, subscribe, all that great stuff. So yeah, here you go. Episode 93 with guest police officer Kelsey Helfrich.
All right, if you're looking at me to figure out,
No, it's good to go.
I still can't ever fucking figure it out.
So you have to wait for it to say recording done or recording in progress. Whenever it's done with that,
Is it
then
like a
you
one?
go.
Is it like a one Mississippi and then we're good, or is it just like immediately?
It's as soon as the magical person is done talking, it's good to go.
The best choice Siri.
Yes. It's always safe.
Always save Alexa.
Yes, you are correct.
Kelsey,
Yes.
welcome to the Washdown podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You good? How's life out in the desert?
It's really good. It's really good out here.
Is it very hot out there right now?
Right now. This is gonna sound so silly coming from the Midwest, but it's in the high 90s and it's amazing now.
But
Like,
it's a dry
finally-
heat.
It's a dry heat. It's finally down out of the hundreds, so it's nice here.
I will be out there in November. I forgot to tell you. So
Really?
yeah, I'll be out there on the bike with the lady. So let's get together.
Let's do it. That'd be awesome.
I'm so excited.
It'll
We're
be
gonna hang out
perfect
with you.
weather.
It's gonna be great.
So I'm going surfing in November, so suck it. But
Mm.
when are you going? Because that affects the podcast schedule.
Oh, I didn't think about that. God, these adult
Oh.
responsibilities fucking suck.
Yeah. Responsibilities, standards, holding people accountable, all the stuff that we talk about on this podcast. Some of us choose not to follow that at all.
Well, my friend, thank you for coming on. Let's start with just the basics. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it?
Kelsey. I am a Mesa police officer. I've been with Mesa for 2 years. Prior, I was Kansas City, Missouri Police Department for 5. So total of almost 7 now. It'll be 7 in February. My grandpa was actually a lieutenant on Independence, Missouri Police Department. And I wanted to be a cop. He loved it. He lived and breathed police work. So I kind of fell in love with it because of how much he loved it. The idea of it anyway at that point when I was young. And then when I was old enough, I applied and I got a position at KCPD in 2006 or 15. Technically, I started the academy.
You did a stint in the Air Force as well, I believe, correct?
6 years. Yeah, 6 years.
What made you want to do that before you went into law enforcement?
So I actually applied for KCPD before you had to be 21 in the academy, like when you graduate the academy. I applied when I was 20. I knew I wasn't going to get it. I knew I was too young, but I just had to apply. I was so excited to be a cop. So I applied. Of course, they turned me down. I wasn't old enough. And then I tried to do a year of college. I went to Longview Community College, and college just was not for me. And at the time, now I'm regretting it and I want to go back, right, when I'm almost 30. But my dad was military career, so I decided to join the Air Force after a year of college, and I was like, I don't want to do college anymore.
What made you not go career?
The military is a weird family, and there was a lot of stuff going on. I was, you know, the schedules being first response. I worked every weekend, and it seemed like every time I'd get a weekend off, I'd have to go down. Like at that point, I had started doing the reserve, so I was going in on just 1 weekend a month. And it went once I got in the police department, and it seemed like every weekend that I was not at KCPD, I was having to go down to the military base and be in uniform again. I didn't have, for about 2 years, I had no personal life. Like it was just military police. I was never out of a uniform. So I got kind of, I just wanted some personal time to be a person, just be a person and not be a uniform.
Say what? You mean take time for yourself?
Yeah, I was ready for it.
I don't appreciate these blasphemous ideals that she's presenting on this show.
No. Mister goes on vacation all the time. Shirks his
Yeah,
responsibilities.
I see those.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't need
I'm
your
happy
little.
for you though. I'm happy for you. Those are necessary. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Kelsey, tell me a little bit about your time. I almost just cut to the chase with you, truthfully, because I know your love and passion for law enforcement, and I know how proactive you are in community policing and your love for the community you serve. But I also know that community, especially in your old job, didn't always serve you the way you served it, and it took a toll on you.
For sure.
Run me through that. What was that like on a daily basis? Every time you put your uniform on, getting ready to know what you're about to walk into.
So it's kind of funny. You realize on the job that the hatred is trained. And so my mindset, like I went into work and every time like I'd load up my car, I'd had a box and I'd kept kids' toys and dog food and treats in it. Because those are the two things on the job that were relief for me. Because the kids, like when they get to a certain age, it seems like not all of them, but a lot of them are just trained to hate the uniform. They don't hate us. They love, and a lot of people love seeing females in uniform, female cops. They just, because you don't expect it. So kids love that. And it was such a weird dynamic because the community for the most part really didn't like the uniform, but the kids they just loved it. And so you'd have these crappy calls and deal with these people that hated you. But like in between, like you said, I was huge on community policing and giving out candy to kids in between. Even if the parents, like you'd have to sometimes hide it from the parents because they would slap their kids if they talked to us or slap their kids if they looked at us or waved at us, So it's such a weird love-hate relationship from the community. But the kids were always such a good relief for me because they didn't have any hatred ingrained in them yet, usually, at least by the time the younger ones. So you could get that nice little break of in between the crappy calls. The kids loved it. They loved seeing uniforms. They loved the lights and sirens and sitting in a cop car and touching the, horn. They loved it. So it was weird. It was a weird relationship in Kansas City.
How do you, or what does the department do to combat ingrained hatred? How do you, is that something like, hey, hope you guys figure it out on your own? Or is that something they teach you in the academy? I mean, how do you combat it?
I don't think there was anything taught in the academy. And it's not that necessarily the department. Especially coming from a new agency where there's not the racial divide as bad as Kansas City. It's more of just Kansas City was so violent and the officers were so busy that you had to actually and it's not a dog on any officers, but you had to make time for community policing there because you were so busy call to call to call that even just really quick handing a kid a Reese's cup was everything to them. And if that's all you could do, just do it, and a lot of officers were just so busy just going call to call. They didn't care. It's not that they didn't care. They just didn't prioritize that. So you just kind of have to find a balance of prioritizing the community policing versus just the busyness of calls. And it's not the academy's fault either, what they train you. They teach class in the academy, obviously, community policing and just the different issues, the racial issues going on. But nothing. And social media has become such a huge thing too. And that even just in the 7 years I've been a cop, how much it's changed and how big it's made community policing is night and day.
What was you made a good point. You referenced in your old job, in your old city, how violent it was. I don't think that's a secret. It's one of the most homicides in the country every year. What is that? How much of a toll does that take on you as an officer? Just all you deal with all day is just such violence, seeing the worst of people every day like that compared to other cities, especially the one you work in now.
So it's it was really fun. When I was on training out here, in FTO, field training in Mesa, my FTO, even as a lateral, they treated me like a friend. You know, they were my boss too, but they treated me like a friend because I was prior law enforcement. And he had to tell me to wave at people because it was so ingrained, the hatred of police, that you didn't wave at anybody besides kids if you could, because they're the only people that were okay, accepting of you. And you just drove and people flipped you off. People just mother effed your car. And so came out here, my FTO was like, just wave at those people on the porch. And I was like, what? And he's like, just wave at them. Just be nice. Just be friendly. It's okay. And I waved and they all waved back. And I was like, what?
I'm in the Twilight Zone.
People are so nice out here. So it's such a weird dynamic again, and then state to state, how different it is. But Kansas City, it makes officers, if they're not careful, it makes you so just burnout is a word too, I guess I could use, but
Callous,
jaded,
callous. Yeah, callous. It's just, and you run so many of these calls and so much violence that when it comes to the smaller calls, which even though this seemed like a small call to you, it's probably someone's worst day of their life. You know, they're calling 911 and you come in there and I have to take a step back and be like, if this was me calling and I was having the worst day of my life, would I want these cops to come out and act like they don't give a shit? You know, sorry, give a crap. And that's just how you get that mindset in Kansas, like in my mind, in Kansas City, because I'm just running so many shootings and stabbings and homicides and cuttings, and that these small domestic violences of verbal fights, you know, you have to take a step back and be like, it's big to them. It is big to them. It may not seem big to us, but it's huge to them. And it could just get worse if we don't stop what's going on now and explain to them how they can try and stop it, you know?
Well, and we were just talking about that, about people's ability to problem solve and resiliency is it seems like it's on a very steep downward decline, because we see it, you know, on the fire department all the time. We're running calls that it's like, really, you're calling 911 for this? But you know, there has to be that level of professionalism where, yeah, we might think it's stupid, but it's like you said, this is the worst day of their life, or they have no idea what to do. So they called us. And you have to, when you show up, you have to be professional. And if you can't solve the problem, at least mitigate it to the point where they feel like they're okay, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, that can wear on you so much, and it can turn people callous and jaded. And you know, because it is call after call after call after call that you're running. I mean, these aren't one-offs that we're talking about. I mean, this is 90% of the crap that you're doing on a daily basis. So
there were times like in Kansas City where there was multiple shootings that would come out in one time, and you'd have to try to prioritize which one sounded like the most critical. Like, oh, one guy was shot in the foot and the other one was shot in the torso and in the arm. And you're like, well, that guy was shot multiple times. I need to prioritize that before this guy is shot. It was just like, it's mind blowing, you know, that that's the kind of thing.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about that. Like, if the citizens only knew, like, just, and it's politics that does it, right? Politics cause morale, lack of morale causes lack of love in the job. Lack of love in the job causes short staffing, and short staffing creates chaos and nightmares. And the fact that, like, you know, if the citizen, if a dispatcher, Jeremy and I just said this, if a dispatcher was like, hey, here's the deal, we got one cop dealing with a drunk on a sidewalk, and one cop dealing with a naked guy dancing in the street, and one cop dealing with a drunk driver, but we'll get right to you being shot when we get a chance. People would lose it.
Lose it. But they don't. But they don't see that. But they don't have any clue what's going on. But it is, you know.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's mind blowing to me. Like, we know it.
Yeah.
But like, if the public knew it, the city would burn.
Yeah. Well, go ahead. Sorry.
I had a guy. It was, the call lines were so busy in Kansas City. We had a guy shoot himself in the leg one time, and he called an Uber. He's like, we showed up at the hospital, and there's a Tesla in the parking lot, like cordoned off, like crime scene tape. And we walk in, and he's like, yeah, that's my Uber driver. I tried calling 911, but the lines were so busy, I had to call an Uber to the hospital. I couldn't get to an ambulance. I was like, what? I just apologized. I'm like, I'll pay for your Uber. Like, I feel terrible. Like, I can't even show up to you shooting yourself because the lines are too busy. It's just crazy. It's so wild back home.
Here's a follow-up question.
Yeah.
How did he manage to shoot himself in the leg?
Actually, it was just like one of those really nice one-light apartments downtown too. He was just cleaning his gun, and I guess he didn't. I don't. He seemed very legit, but then again,
cleaning your gun with that just means you're stupid. That's
putting it. Yeah.
I'm sorry,
but how stupid is he though? If he knew an Uber would get him to the hospital fast?
Well, I mean,
that's fair. Fair.
That is
like he made up for it. Like,
yeah, you're not wrong. Like he problem solved.
Like penalties offset.
Yeah.
Played it down.
Oh man, I just forgot that there was one in there while I was what?
Kelsey, I know you've always been very aware and cognizant of your mental health, and you've always, and since I've known you and you've been a good friend, you've always, I don't want to say worn it on your sleeve, but made it known how you felt, but then acted accordingly within it. Walk me through when you left your previous department, where you were mentally with that.
I love this job so much. Like, I think I was very burnt out, and I love the job so much. There was a big exodus of cops at that point. Like, we had, I think, an average of like 17 and a half officers, they said, leaving them in a month. So I actually applied with this police department I'm in now before all that happened, before the George Floyd riots, before it got really bad. So I was already in my mind wanting a change. And mine was just quality of life. I was unhappy in Kansas City, and I just wanted to. I'd been to Arizona multiple times, and I'm a big avid hiker. I was like, oh, why not? Like, I'm not on kids. I'm not married. But it kind of all happened at once. The George Floyd riot started, and like my car got destroyed, just out there day and night, crap thrown at us, rocks. And it was kind of when everybody got pardoned that was doing all that I was really burnt. And also just every officer, the call was wearing on me, and just shooting after shooting, homicide after homicide. But I knew I wasn't ready to leave the job. I said, I'm going to give one more department a shot. I'm going to try one more department. Maybe it's just I'm unhappy where I'm at and everything going on. And if I go to a different department with less going on in the city, I might be happier, because I just wasn't ready to quit police work. If you go into this job with the right mindset, it's the best job in the world, and you can do so much good with it. Like, you really can. But Kansas City was just very toxic at that point. And it wasn't, and there's no specific person whose fault it was. It was just the time, everything going on, the city, prosecutors. There was a bunch. It wasn't one specific thing. So I decided to just try. I wanted to stay in police work. I wasn't ready to get out. So I decided to try again, just another department, and see if I came out here and I didn't feel any different, I'd know that it was just my time to leave the job.
And you would at least have been in Arizona. Like,
yeah.
Darn, look at this terrible surrounding of mine.
Yeah, it's terrible, ugly place, Arizona. So.
And
but let's be fair though. I mean, yes, Kansas City has its problems, but it wasn't just Kansas City at that time. I mean, you could look at almost every major metropolitan city or area in the country was having a lot. I mean, Portland, Seattle, New York City, Detroit. Yeah. I mean, you can look everywhere, and they were having all the exact same problems: the riots, the looting, the cops getting shot at, shit getting thrown at them. All of these protests. So, I mean, you guys took a huge hit for that.
So many of them were politically driven too.
Oh, absolutely.
And we just talked about how, like, Kelsey, before you came on, something we were talking about was like, if Joe Schmo citizen, like we talked about, like, hey, you're not getting an ambulance for 15 minutes, or you're not getting a cop for 15 minutes. Well, why am I not getting a cop? Well, because the people you elected in your city aren't really big fans of them, and their continued rhetoric drove most of them away. What?
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what?
Yep.
And it's when politics get involved, it's scary. And you saw that on a lot of different layers in your previous city. Like you said, from the prosecutor's office to the mayor to the citizens, like everybody had an agenda, and sadly, that agenda wasn't the safety of the public.
Not at all. But they don't want you to know that.
No,
they don't want you to know that.
And then I'll give her credit because I come out west usually, God, 3-4 times a year traveling. There's been many times if my grandpa wasn't here, I'm just like, I could live out here.
The West is so beautiful.
And so actually, let's dive into that a little bit. How has your mental health improved? Let's set aside the law enforcement aspect, but being in a place where like you have all those outlets for you, especially with hiking, because you are an avid hiker. I remember your wedding photos were in a chapel. Like, talk to me a little bit about how your mental health has improved just from all of the things you have out there besides a different department.
So I got very lucky too in the aspect before I left, I met my now husband, and that has been my saving grace too. I was also in a very, I won't go into details because that's very well known in Kansas City, a very toxic relationship before. That was part of the reason why I left to Kansas City, is because there was a lot of rumors being spread from that, and I was just ready to start my life over. I was like, I don't need that. So I came out here, and it was crazy coming out here because you don't realize how much your life changes when you go all the way across the country to everything's different out here. The religion, the dynamics, the type of people, everything. And we didn't come out here knowing a single person. It was just him and I. So we came out here by ourselves, had to start from nothing. But we had those other things, but that also made it fun because everything is new, everything is fun, and all the hiking too. We're both very physical. He's a college athlete, so there's softball and baseball all year round out here. So he got relief from that. He was prior law enforcement. My husband, he was in Kansas City with me. He is out fully now. He is now working as a supervisor for loss prevention. I don't know. I think everybody should leave their home state at least once and live somewhere else. I left in the military for a few months for training. I was stationed in a military base in Missouri. I got stuck right back home.
Welcome back, bitch.
Yeah, I'm going to travel the world.
That's what
30 miles away from where I grew up. Yeah.
In Knob Noster, Missouri. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just everybody should get away from home, even if it's for a year or 6 months, just to learn different cultures and different areas and different climate. Like it's been so much fun, and it's taken a huge stress relief just coming out and being able to start again.
What have you told some of your fellow coworkers back home in the other departments? Like, are you the mindset of, hey guys, stick it out, it'll get better, or fucking bail and come out where it's nice?
This is gonna sound so this is so messed up, but I think you guys as first responders will understand. I came from a city, like Kansas City was so violent and the culture was so just 24, just rapid, that I came out here and it's so slow that half the time I'm like, God, I miss the busyness.
Yeah.
and what people see out here is like crazy, and like violent crime out here is like the most mild thing back home. And I'm just like, you guys are waking out about that? Like, just calm down. Like, it's not that bad. Like, but I hate seeing the department back home, what it's turned into an office. Like, I still talk to all my friends back home still on KCPD, and I hate it for them because I have so many good memories from that department. I'm never gonna say bad about the officers I worked with or anything like that because I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Like when you're running hot all night long, one, you bond so much closer with the people you work with. Like when you're just violent call to violent call, like it's a closeness you can't explain. And it's also out here, I'll make this quick. The fire department, the friendship with the fire department out here is nothing like back home with you guys. Like, you guys, if we were in a fight, me and my partner with a guy on PCP, a whole truck would get out and come help us get that guy safely into custody, if you know what I mean. Like, if we were getting our asses kicked, the whole truck would get out and help us fight this guy. And out here, like, the fire department, they're scared to come into calls. Like, you have to go to them physically, tell them the scene is safe, then they'll come in. And a lot of times they come in like helmets and heavy vests. And I'm like, what? So it's just so weird. Like, we were very close with the fire department back home. And out here, like, we're still close with them, but it's nothing like that. It's like a weird dynamic out here with the fire department. And it's just something I'm not used to.
Yeah. Well, I will say that different municipalities have different standards and SOPs, so
I want a heavy vest.
I mean, I got one, but I don't take it to work.
I mean, I guess I'm heavy, so just give me the vest.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, everybody has
Yeah.
their rules and regs that, hey, and a lot of departments are very strict about enforcement on those things. Some are more lax. So
Makes sense.
I wouldn't, we have the same, talk about, and I've had the same talk with the younger guys on the job about, because they'll bitch about, we'll run mutual aid with somebody and, well, they're not doing this or they're not doing that. I'm like, well, hold on. The reason they're not doing that is because they can't. They have a different standard that they have to abide by than we do. So cut them some slack. It's not that they're bad firemen. It's just that
Oh no.
they're not allowed to do this shit that we're allowed to do.
I will say though, Kelsey, some of my funniest, best,
Very loud.
her and I have done some shit.
I'm telling you, I live for my stories from back home. I live for them. I had the best time on that job. I really did.
I mean, like, we literally had a PCP.
You spoon fed him like a baby.
He wouldn't. He was high on PCP, and he was being an asshole. But he just happened to have a low blood sugar. And so I had my oral glucose. I'm like, hey, man, we got to fix this. He's like, fuck you. Don't fucking touch me. And I'm like, hey, man, like, I'm trying to be reasonable. Like, and he's just like, and then, like, he straight up went like 3-year-old on us. And so I'm like, here with this little tube, like, go like this. And he's like, and I just looked at him and I go, hey, what? Open up for the choo-choo. And he goes, fuck you. And I go, cool, right in his mouth. And she about fell out of the ambulance.
I had to step out. I had to get out.
Like, but that's the, like, and that's the, when she says she misses it, like, even like, cause I'm not on the ambulance much anymore. I moved to our rescue division. So like,
Nice.
even I miss that shit kind of like, it's just, there's
Oh,
just a bond in stories that in the back of an ambulance or on the back of some unlit alley that you just like,
you can't explain it.
you can't explain it. People won't believe it, but they're memories that you're going to carry forever.
Oh yeah. I miss those. I really do.
Like, do you even have PCP out there?
No, people have no clue what it is.
No.
People have no clue. Like, you'll hear stories and they'll like, try to explain, and I know what it is when they explain it, but they have no clue. They think it's just a guy that's manic. But I'm like, no. If he's big and naked running around a park,
He's wet.
he's not manic. he's wet. But they have no clue. It's the opioid crisis out here. It's fentanyl.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's bad. We carry Narcan on us. We have to have it.
That's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
That
And
is. God, if you guys had that back home, like at your previous job, that'd have been huge.
We should. All officers should carry it, and they say it's for they say it's for yourself, and other officers, but you're using it so much out here that you just go through it. You can't really, unless you just set aside a specific batch for yourself. You're using it on all the people out here overdosing. Every shift there's an overdose. Every shift.
What is going on out there with that? I mean, it's a we hear about it being a national epidemic. Luckily back home, I mean, it's a problem here, but we haven't. I mean, what are you seeing out there? What is it? Is it just like what's causing it?
Well, it's all coming from Mexico, and we're so close to Mexico. We're a 4-hour drive from the border. So it's just coming up. And this is where like all the interdiction is like we're getting Phoenix just got their biggest fentanyl bust in history. I forget how many thousands and thousands of pills they got. It's just unreal. And it's so cheap out here too. And it's now like I think it's between $3 and $5 for one pill, and they can get multiple smokes out of one pill. How they do it is they put a piece of foil and they have a tube like a cut straw, and they burn it underneath on the foil and they inhale it, and they can get usually 2 to 3 smokes out of one pill, and a lot of them go through 20 to 50 pills a day.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's the worst I've ever. It's worse than PCP because it's so common. Like PCP was terrible when it was there, but there wasn't many deaths on it. But fentanyl is so potent and powerful that I've done CPR 2 or 3 times the last week or two. Like it's so common there. They go in bathrooms in any grocery store, gas station, and they smoke. The transients, the homeless, and you get the call and you immediately know it's an overdose. And it's just it's constant. It's constant.
What are some of the resources, plans in place that the city has done with their first responders out there to at least maybe not combat it, but react to it better? Obviously, Narcan being in law enforcement's huge. What else?
It's huge. And there's not the most that we can honestly just keep doing is, and it sounds terrible, but we just have to we have a lot of specialized units out here. We have a lot of interdiction, a lot of undercover squads, a lot of dogs that are in the train stations, that are in all the airports, everything. We have a lot when it comes to that. Officers individually, it's usual as patrol. Just the only difference is we have Narcan and we know what it looks like. Like, and you can spot it. I don't know how. Like back home, it was always you got the call and the people were going crazy in the street and destroying stuff and naked. Out here, you don't have, I don't even know how to explain it. You don't have any time. Like as soon as they smoke it, you have minutes to get to them. So it's just response is huge out here. And it's also weird because in Kansas City, we went code 1. I think it was code 1. I get so confused with the 2 departments now. Code 1, lights and sirens. It's code 3 out here to every call. And out here, I actually could get in trouble if my commander heard me say this. So we had this, they don't want you to go code to anything except for violent crimes or for preservation of life. So a lot of times these officers are not going code 3, lights and sirens, to when they hear an overdose call. It comes out as a cardiac arrest. And there's this girl I kind of took under my wing. She's a really new officer and I love her to death. And she's very, just out of the academy. So she's very by the book. And we have this, it came out as an overdose in the bathroom of a Jack in the Box. And she was going normal speed. And I said, I got there before. And I was like, well, why don't you just go code? And she goes, well, we're not supposed to by policy just to, to a cardiac. It's only like, I was like, well, if this was your brother and you found out that the police were called 911 because he's overdosing in a bathroom and they were just going normal speed to it, would you be upset if your brother died? And she was like, oh, it's kind of clicked with her. I was like, treat these calls like it's your family. If it's a non-injury accident, sure, go normal speed to it. But if it's a guy in a cardiac arrest in a bathroom with possible overdose, get your ass there. Like, explain later to your commanders why you decided to drive fast. Like, because if that was my brother dying in a bathroom, would I want these officers to just be going normal speed because it's policy? Like, I'm sorry, that sounds terrible, but I'm for breaking policy if it's certain things. There's certain situations where you just have to. The policy is a guideline, not a law,
So my question would be, why did they implement that policy to begin with? Was it to try to mitigate,
accidents? It's there, for public safety. I assume that's way above my pay level, but I know it's because, and it's true, like in Kansas City, when you drive code all the time, there's more accidents, there's more officers getting into accidents. And I understand that, but that's part of our training is we're trained to defensive drive. We're trained to drive at code 1 and code 3. So just be careful, get there safe. But I think
don't smoke the ambulance on the way.
don't smoke the ambulance or the cop car or a civilian. Just drive safe, but get there. Like
it happened again, by the way.
No, it did not.
Yeah. Brand new Explorer.
See, that's why. If you ask, that's why they want you to drive. So.
Well,
it happened again.
Oh, no.
I don't even know what to say.
I'll send you the pictures after.
Please do. Please.
So here our prevalent drug was PCP. And I can say this, like, our PCP calls were memorable. Some were fun, some were not. I mean, there were the times where we would show up and they're screaming naked in the street. We're like, oh, great. And then I had the times where I'd show up and there were 9 cops in a circle with a dude covered in his own shit in the middle of it. And I'm like, fuck you.
Party for James.
Yeah. And every cop knows me and is just smiling at me like, fuck you, Moran. Yeah.
Here.
Obviously with the fentanyl, it's completely different. We're talking about loss of life. We're talking about minutes. That's not the same fun, memorable calls. And it sounds like you're doing them way too frequently. How do you stay emotionally invested?
So it's kind of a fine balance I've found. So I don't know. Some officers, how they cope with all these calls, I guess, is, there's people that drink, they go out and they have choir practice, or they dip, they smoke. I mean, like I've noticed you have your bike and you travel. Mine is just, I don't take this job home. So, I mean, every officer at some point does. They'll take calls home, and I do at some point. But for the most part, when I leave work, I don't keep it. I leave it right where it's at. And if I have a really bad call, anytime I have a really bad call, I come home and I just tell my husband once the story, tell him what happened, and then he never asks again, and I never talk about it again. And it's just, I feel like it needs to stay there. It needs to stay there. And I know I need those calls, you need to talk about them. So that's why I tell him once, and then I dump it, and I just leave it where it was. That's just where it takes, why some officers stay in longer than others. Some officers, I'm lucky in that aspect that I'm able to play, kind of just put it away once I leave work, and I don't think about it again. I try to not think about work when I'm at home. And I know especially a lot of cops, this job becomes so much of your identity, it's hard to leave it. But you have to, because your home life is more important than the job. It really is.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You're actually the perfect person to ask this, because I think of all the other people we've had on the show, they haven't been in the situation you've been in. We've talked before about on the podcast about how sometimes it seems like firefighters, cops, nurses date each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost, one can argue it's toxic in how our relationships are formed, because so many of them are truly trauma bonds. Like, hey, God, that call was shitty. Let's go get drunk and fuck. Like, it's,
Mm-hmm.
we laugh, but it's kind of true. With your husband no longer being in law enforcement, how has the dynamic of your relationship changed? Because we've talked about too, like, it's hard when, one's a cop, one's a firefighter, both are cops. We just come home and all of what do we talk about? Just our shit days doing the same thing that we all know and how terrible it is. That's been removed from him now. How has your dynamic changed with that? Is it got better? I would assume it's gotten better.
Yeah, it's, they say not to date other officers, and to an extent, I dated an officer previously and it didn't work out and it wasn't the best relationship, but that's not as much to do with the job as just we didn't work well together. And it is true, both, you're type A. To be in this job, you have to be type A. So, or most are type A. So it's gotten better, but I would honestly, it's such a weird thing, because I'll tell people, like, when they say they're dating another cop after, I'm like, ooh, be careful. But then I'm like, how can I say that? Like, look at my husband, right? Like, I'm like, it's just like ingrained in me to be like, yeah. So it's gotten better, but it's still at the same time, I'm so glad he was law enforcement, because he understands, like, there's nights where I come home and I know I should probably talk about that night then, but he'll know when I need to wait, because I'll just like, sometimes I'll come home and I'll just, as soon as I walk in that door, I'm venting about that day, and he knows, and he just listens. And then there's other days where I come home and I don't say a word about it to start, but he knows I was on a crappy call, because I'll tell him when I go on. Like if I don't answer for 3 hours, I'll just be like, "Hey, sorry, on a suicide." Like, and then he knows like suicide calls like are my call. Like they affect me the most, I guess. They're my I'm also, it's terrible also. I'm called the Grim Reaper out here. For some reason, I was called that back home too. I seem to get all.
I fucking remember.
Yeah, and it came out here. So
Oh,
it
so
seems like,
so you're telling me I can't escape it either?
no, if you
Damn
have
it.
that, you're gonna have it. Because I came out here and I get all of the terrible deaths, the bodies, the crashes, the suicides. So it's my omen. So they call me the Grim Reaper out here. So I'm very big on those calls. So he knows when I say I'm on a suicide. If I want to talk about it and I get home and I start talking about it, he knows, but he will never press. So being married to a prior law enforcement officer is the best thing for me. Like I couldn't imagine, because people that don't know the job are always so curious, as you are. People are naturally curious. So it's nice having someone that knows when I come home. They don't ask 100 questions if they know I'm not wanting that right now. You know, he'll wait until I'm ready to talk about it, and then he'll ask me questions. But he knows just what to say and what not to say. So he's great. It's great.
Why suicides? We all have our calls. We all have our things, our triggers. Why suicide for you?
So I lost my best friend to suicide in 2021 in January, on the drive out here to move out. I had another friend call me, a mutual friend, and say my friend had killed himself. I'd grown up with him since high school. And even before that, just the mental health aspect, like so this is how, in my mind, PTSD, not that I didn't believe in it, but I never had realized or accepted that it was a thing until I went on a suicide back home that was a hanging. And I'd never seen a hanging yet, and it was my first one. And this guy was home with his 2 kids, and they were adult kids upstairs, and he just went downstairs in the basement by himself. He picked up a bottle of J. Riger's whiskey off the cabinet, chugged half of it at least, and there was still like the imprint of dust around it. The bottle hadn't been touched in years probably. He set it on the stairs, grabbed an extension cord, and hung himself right with his kids above him, and his wife found him luckily before the kids did. And I realized how it affects you, because now I will never go to J. Riger's, and I will never drink their whiskey. And it's not because I have anything against them. It's just every time I see that bottle, I go back to seeing that bottle on the stairs and his body hanging beside it. So that's how PTSD, PTS affects. I realize it's a real thing, because I don't say. It's just I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's not like a thing I feel all the time, but just when I saw that image, my mind went back to that call, and I'd never had that before until I realized it. And like it sounds weird. I went on another suicide, and there was a type of protein powder up on this guy's fridge. It was like a synthesis dessert thing. And every time I see that now, I'm just like, I shudder. I go back to that call. And it's like, it's just how your brain remembers things, little things like that. So all of that combined, and then the mental health, I was fortunate enough in Kansas City. I was lucky to I tried to just respond to as many calls as possible. And I feel like you can do so much in patrol. And I was lucky enough to go to 2 were on duty, and 1 was on the way to work. 2 people I pulled off of bridges trying to jump. And then 1, I was actually on the way to work, crossing the Bond Bridge. And I was in uniform. I didn't even have my radio. And I saw this guy just hike a leg over. And I turned around real quick, and I went back and I called on my phone. I was like, hey, get officers here. And luckily someone had already called. They saw him do it too before I could turn around. And we were lucky enough. They shut the bridges down, the officers, and me and the sergeant pulled him off. We tricked him, and I stood on one side and talked to him, and the sergeant jumped and we got him off. So it's just all of the most memorable calls to me are ones that involve suicide, and the mental health aspect is just huge for me in this job, because you have to have an outlet, or else you'll go, it just, it'll end you up like the people that we go on calls with. So mental health is huge for me in this job. Huge.
And so we worked in the same Rear Patrol division. My station were same for a long time, and I think you can get this too. And I'm curious, going down to Mesa now. I mean, think about how many times, especially with our call volume in the city, an intersection, a house, whatever it may be, how many different little triggers there were there, like ran a shooting there, ran a bad wreck there, ran a stabbing. Like it's just it's hard to even drive around in our city anymore, and just it's all over.
Yeah.
Like
you have little memories everywhere.
Yeah, I was talking with my girlfriend the other day. I was just like, I legit don't know if there's a major stoplight intersection in the city that I haven't ran a wreck in. Like,
yeah,
I can't think of one, and that's just in 5 years. Like, what the fuck?
It's crazy.
It's just so. What was it kind of like? I guess. What did you've talked about like what kind of the different calls and stuff, but just the change of scenery to get rid of that. What was it like? Kind of because obviously you're learning a new department, you're learning your 100 blocks, you're learning all this stuff too while getting a fresh start. Was it a difficult balance? Was it kind of easy? How did it come to you?
It's such a weird thing out here because like it is new types of calls, but like Kansas City, it's all your talk on the radio is plain talk. Like a dead body is a dead body, a shooting is a shooting. Out here, everything is codes. Okay. So, it's so hard.
Your little index card, you're like, I'm on a.
Oh my god! So like a dead body is a 903, a shooting is a 901, a stabbing is a 902, a homicide is a 451. So it's and like there's still like half the time I'll hear the codes, and luckily the computers will say it says the code, then what it is underneath it. So I'm like, oh, I don't even remember what that is. So I am glad I did it because it was such a challenge that I needed that, because there's some people I feel like in this job that they become a cop and that's all they do for the rest of their life. They go in the same square of the city. They know the same terms, the same codes, the same businesses. And for me, it was fun. It was a challenge. And I had to learn Arizona laws there's some that are very similar to Kansas City, but a lot that are very different. The type of people out here, it's so different. And there's so much support out here compared to back home. That's just, like I told you, that story having to wave, and like going to Quick Trip, people like fighting over buying your stuff. It's like, it's weird. It's so odd.
Y'all got Quick Trips out there?
We do. And cops live at all of them out here too.
Shocker.
Yeah. So it was really challenging, but it was fun. It was fun having to learn it all. But it's also weird because the officers, I was told before I even came out here as a lateral, they're like, be careful as a lateral, because if you're not a Mesa Academy graduate, they're not going to take you as serious. And I was like, okay.
Get fucked, Kansas City, bitch.
Yeah. And like, so they treat you different out here. And not all of them. Some people treat me just like I've been there my entire career and they're awesome. But there are other officers that are just kind of like, when I reference things back home, I don't mean it to be disrespectful to this department. It's just because like, that's what I spent 5 years doing repetitive every day. So it's like, when there's a shooting out here, and this is going to sound insensitive, they treat it like it is like they shut the city down. I mean, there's 7 sergeants, there's 50 officers, it's just crazy. And I could run shootings back home with just my partner and I and 1 sergeant, and it'd take an hour, and we'd wrap it up, get crime scene out there, photos, and that was it. And you went to the next shooting. Out here, the officers, like, there's a shooting and it makes their entire week. It's like the biggest deal of the week out here. And it's funny how, coming from Kansas City, it's kind of eye-opening seeing the difference.
I remember laughing with you about how you handled shot spotter calls here.
Oh no.
I could just say. No, I won't say it on here. But I could just imagine what that would be like out there. Do they have that out there?
No.
Oh, thank God.
I still have access. Someone's gonna watch this from the department and take away I still somehow have access to ShotSpotter, and I love to show my new department, like, look at this crazy, like, look at Kansas City right here. Listen to the gunshots back home. It's like, but no, we have nothing like that out here. Nothing like that.
Well, like you said, I mean, different part of the country, different problems.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
How do you? So that's another thing. Definitely, the skills you had in Kansas City made you sharp. Callous maybe, burnout maybe, but sharp. You were in the shit here. Have you found yourself, or how do you stay from getting a little too lax with a little less call volume?
So one thing that's good out here is because there is less violence, that anything that could possibly be violent, we tone it as what we call a hot call. So if there's like a domestic violence call and any threat of a weapon, like back home, everybody said there's a gun involved to get police there quick. Everybody. So
oh my
out
God,
here,
this baby's walking down the sidewalk. I think he has a gun.
right? See? So out here, if there's any word of a gun involved, they tone it to hot. It's a different radio channel you switch over to. So just that one channel, and no one else can interfere on it. And we go to it.
You don't have to say hold the air, and nobody holds the air.
People out here, it's weird. Like out here, you don't get on the radio much. You limit your talk on the radio as much as possible. It's totally different than Kansas City. So there's a lot of hot calls and you try and go to every hot call you can, because whether or not it is going to be what it sounds like, it's still good practice. And officers out here need to drive code. They don't drive code 3 enough. So every time I hear them going to a hot call and code, I'm like, good. They need the reps. Cause like you go code so much back home that it was just like normal day-to-day driving. Like you're falling asleep. You can fall asleep half the time. I mean, driving code, because it was just all the way around the city all night, just code.
Yeah, which could lead to another form of complacency, which
Absolutely.
may be why, I mean, it's both ends of the
spectrum there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny too, coming out here. It's very different investigation wise. So officers out here are expected to do, like Kansas City, you went to the initial call, you passed everything off to detectives, and you went to the next. You were so busy. Out here, they expect you, unless it's a felony investigation, to start to finish the investigation. You file charges and everything. Like you do the full investigation.
HBO.
That's it. That's exactly what it was in Kansas City. So out here, there's so much paper involved that I'm not good at that, because I'm so used to going to hot call. So I'm more comfortable out here going on any violent call than I am going to your day-to-day order protection service call, because I'm so bad at the paperwork, like, because I'm just not used to it. It's funny how it works. Like I love hot calls out here. I go to them more than I do normal calls, because that's what I'm used to. It's night and day.
Better practice those typing skills.
What happened on the call? Oh, it got crazy. All right, type it out. What?
I can't.
What happened was
oh my God, look, I'm pretty. Please don't make me do this.
It's wild.
Oh,
Kelsey, we'll get ready to wrap it up. What would you, going through what you've went through, where you are now, other officers, or even firefighters or nurses, other first responders and healthcare workers that are stuck in a rut, getting burnt out, finding themselves not loving the career anymore, what advice do you have for them?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. You got to find your why, and then remember your why. And then you have to find, honestly, what's kept me also is like, I had a burnout even when I was over here with the job. You got to find like-minded people, and you got to find the support in the department, because there are people that have the same mindset as you and that are in it for the right reasons. Because there's, like any job, there's people that are in it for the wrong reasons. So you gotta gravitate towards the people that have the same mindset as you, and remember why you started. Like you have to remember that. And even if it's just, I always try and think when I go to calls, my mind is, what if this was my family? The officer that I'm going to bring to this call, I want it to be who I would want to show up to my calls. And that brings a sort of professionalism I feel like is important to the job, because I see officers come into calls that are just, they're not, these calls, just family fights or the domestic violence calls, or I didn't sign up for this. I signed up for the running and gunning. And it's not that. 90% of this job is not that. So just remember when you go into every call, if you be the officer that you would want to show up to your house, it'll really open your eyes to how people respond to you and how much they show their love for police work. Even the people that seem to hate PD. Like, there are people in Kansas City that if you treat them with respect on calls and you treat them with care and kindness, that they'll forget you're a cop. You're just there to help them at that point. So just be the cop that you'd want to show up at your house. Remember that. Always remember that.
Jeremy, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what she said. There needs to be a level of professionalism, and that goes across PD and the fire service, EMS, wherever. Sometimes we kind of treat this job or these jobs like the frat house or junior high or whatever, and we kind of get wrapped up in all of that bullshit. And you need to remember, like you said, remember your why. Why did you get in this career field in the first place? Did you want to help people? Did you want to make a difference in your community? Remember that shit.
I think the biggest thing for me, and especially having Kelsey on, is just don't forget the fun of it.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, like I'll have memories, even just with Kelsey, that I'll carry with me the rest of my life that I can barely get through trying to tell the story because I laughed so hard. You know, that was the spoon feeding was just one of them. You know, there were so many great memories, and too, like, document it, take pictures, like within reason. Don't
see there.
Don't be like, oh my God, selfie with a dead body, but just like, don't forget that these people are your friends. You know, don't forget to preserve the memories when appropriate. That's always a big one for me. Kelsey, final thoughts?
Thanks for having me. It's so nice. I'm really missing home. I'm coming home in a week, and it's really nice to talk to you guys. Good to see you.
It's a shit show, just like when he left.
I bet.
Jeremy, see us out.
Nope.
I'm not doing it. I'm not
Yes,
doing
you
it.
are.
No, I'm not doing it.
Yep.
I literally forgot it. Please.
This has become a running joke
damn
and
it.
a running battle.
I don't want to do it.
I don't care.
Wait, pass.
Nope.
I
You
forgot.
guys fighting is just tearing me apart.
No, I panic and I forget what to say. So now I don't remember. I really don't remember. You have
You
a
are
thing.
So full of shit.
Just please.
You've heard me say it 91 times.
And you yell at me for never listening to you because I never do. I never listen to you.
Yes. You're like the son that I never wanted.
That's okay. You're the dad that isn't there.
We see that a lot back up.
So that's a civil, ma'am. Sorry, civil issue.
You're going to want to contact
You
family
should be a
court
cop.
and-
Yeah, but you could be a cop.
Oh, the fire department hired me first. No, go ahead, man. It's good practice. Do it.
If you're struggling, no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
If you're struggling, reach out.
Mm-hmm.
There are resources available. What do you say after that one? I forgot.
If you know somebody that's
If you
struggling,
know somebody that's struggling, reach out.
let them know that you give a shit.
Let them know that you give a shit. Sorry, Kelsey, we're working on this together here. Let them know that you give a shit.
Let them know there are resources available
Let
for
them
them.
know there's resources available for them.
Thanks everyone for stopping by.
Thanks everybody for stopping by.
We'll see you next time.
That.